At just 19 years old, LeBron James entered the NBA with more hype than any rookie in basketball history. But what shocked people wasn't the attention, it was how quickly he started embarrassing veteran players on the court. And some of the names he torched might surprise you. Let me catch you up. LeBron James was considered the most hyped prospect in NBA history, going into the 2003 NBA draft. That's not a small statement. Not the most hyped in a given decade. Not the most hyped in a generation. The most hyped in the history of the entire league. And when you sit with that for a second, you start to understand the weight that was sitting on this kid's shoulders before he even laced up his first pair of NBA sneakers. Think about what that means. Every single player who ever came before him, players who made careers, won titles, changed the culture of the game. None of them arrived with the level of expectation that LeBron carried into his rookie season. And it wasn't just sports media hype either. Michael Jordan, considered the most recognizable player in league history, had retired for the third and final time at the end of the 2002-03 season, and the NBA was ready for another superstar. The timing wasn't just good, it was almost mythological. Jordan walks out, LeBron walks in. The league heavily promoted James, whose team was scheduled for 13 primetime games on TV. 13 as a rookie, on a team that the year before won just 17 games. Not 17 good games, 17 total. The Cavaliers were one of the worst franchises in basketball, and the league was putting them on national television over a dozen times because of one 18-year-old kid. That's how big this was. No player has entered the league with more hype than James. As a high school junior, he graced the cover of Sports Illustrated, paired with a bold caption, "The Chosen One." That cover ran while he was still in high school, still going to class, still technically a child under the law. Sports Illustrated put a high school junior on the cover and called him the Chosen One. And when you look back at it now, they weren't wrong, but in 2002, that was a statement that needed to be earned, and LeBron hadn't even played a single professional minute yet. A year later, ESPN started to broadcast his games at St. Vincent St. Mary. Skipping college was a foregone conclusion. Let that sink in. ESPN was broadcasting high school basketball games, specifically because this one teenager was playing in them. That's the kind of gravitational pull LeBron had on American sports culture before he turned 19. Kids were picking up basketball in driveways because of a high schooler. Coaches at the college level were watching tape on a kid who couldn't legally vote. As a 17-year-old, James played in the first high school game broadcast on ESPN in 13 years, scoring 31 points with 13 rebounds and 6 assists as St. Vincent St. Mary upset Oak Hill Academy, then the #1 ranked prep squad in the nation. He didn't just show up for the spotlight moment. He dominated it. He took the biggest high school game in years against the best team in the country, and he put on a performance that made scouts and coaches watching from NBA front offices put their pens down and just stare. So by the time draft night arrived in 2003, the only real question wasn't whether LeBron would be picked first. The only remaining question was whether James would live up to his billing as the next Michael Jordan. That's it. That was the debate. Not whether he was good. Everyone knew he was good. The debate was whether he was generational, whether the hype machine had gotten ahead of reality, or whether reality was about to get ahead of the hype. Veterans around the league had opinions. Some were curious, some were skeptical, some were openly dismissive. And then October 29th, 2003 arrived. The Sacramento Kings. Arco Arena, a nationally televised game on ESPN. A game the Kings' own owner called the biggest regular season game we've ever had here. LeBron was 18 when he made his NBA debut in a season opener at Arco Arena. The young phenom finished with 25 points, 6 rebounds, 9 assists, and 4 steals on a veteran-stacked Sacramento Kings team that included legitimate NBA stars. In his NBA debut, James logged a game-high 42-50 of playing time, dropping 25 to 6-9 with 4 steals against a veteran-laden Sacramento Kings team. 42 minutes and 50 seconds. They ran him for almost the entire game on night 1, and he delivered, not just delivered, but led the game in playing time and put up a stat line that most veterans would be proud of on their best nights. This was a kid who had been in high school 4 months earlier. He didn't go to college. He didn't play a single minute of Division I basketball. He went straight from the St. Vincent St. Mary Gymnasium to a nationally televised NBA game, and he was the best player on the floor in terms of all-around production. The Sacramento Kings in 2003 weren't a soft team. They had veterans. They had players who had been in the league for years. players who had been to the playoffs, players who knew how to handle young guys coming in with a lot of hype. And none of it worked. LeBron didn't just hold his own. He took 42+ minutes of those men's best efforts, and he produced a number that made the whole country stand up. He dropped 25 points, 6 rebounds, 9 assists, and 4 steals against the Sacramento Kings to open his Cleveland career. Scouts who had been watching basketball for decades were doing double takes at their notepads. The veterans across the league who had tuned in expecting to see some highly hyped kid struggle. With the speed and the physicality of a professional game, they got something entirely different. They got a preview of what was coming for every single one of them. Because LeBron James wasn't going to stay in Sacramento on opening night. He was coming to every city in the league. He was coming to every arena. And he was bringing those 25 to 9-6 nights with him. LeBron was only the third rookie in history to average at least 20 points, 5 assists, and 5 rebounds, joining Oscar Robertson and Michael Jordan. 2 names. That's it. 2 names in the history of the game had done what LeBron did as a teenager in his first season. Oscar Robertson, who played in a completely different era of basketball and is considered one of the greatest to ever play. And Michael Jordan, the guy who had just retired, the guy whose throne everyone was fighting for, the guy whose poster was hanging on the walls of kids across the world. LeBron James joined that list at 19, straight out of high school, against the same veterans who had been playing professional basketball for years, some for over a decade. He didn't just compete with them, he produced at a level that put his name next to the 2 most statistically complete rookies in NBA history. And the veterans who played against him that season, night after night, started to realize something uncomfortable. This kid wasn't going to have a learning curve. LeBron James averaged 29 points, 5 assists, and 5 rebounds in 79 games. In his rookie season in 2003-04, 79 games. He didn't fade. He didn't hit the wall. He didn't have a stretch of 10 games where veterans figured him out and exposed some weakness that took him months to fix. He went out, night after night, against experienced professional basketball players, many of whom had spent years in the league, mastering how to defend young talent. And he delivered the same elite production, start to finish, for the entire season. James never really lagged during his first campaign, and he was named the Eastern Conference's top rookie in all 6 months. 6 months. Every single month of a full NBA regular season, he was the best rookie in the Eastern Conference. Not 5 out of 6, not 4. Everyone. That's consistency at a level that most players never reach in their prime, let alone in their first year against seasoned competition. The veterans had an entire season to adjust, to communicate between teams, to share scouting reports on the kid, and it didn't matter. And while all of this was happening on the court, something was happening off it too. Something that tells you a lot about the environment LeBron walked into when he first arrived in Cleveland. Several Cavaliers questioned if he was ready, subtly implying they saw themselves as superior. Carlos Boozer said before the draft, "We already have players better than him at his position," while Darius Miles doubted the impact a teenager could make in the big league. His own teammates, the men who were supposed to be in his corner, the guys who would share a locker room and a bench with him. They were going on record to say he wasn't ready, that they were better than him. Years later, LeBron would still remember exactly how that felt. "There's video evidence of my teammates basically saying like he's not ready, or there's somebody playing his position," said LeBron James, recalling those early days. He remembered every word, every dismissal, every teammate who went in front of a camera and told the world that an 18-year-old kid from Akron wasn't worth their faith. Those statements aged about as well as you'd expect, because the moment the game started, the moment real basketball was being played under real lights in real NBA arenas, it became clear very quickly that the men who doubted LeBron James were going to have to explain themselves. Not to the media, not to the fans, but to the box score, which doesn't lie, doesn't spin, and doesn't have any patience for veteran privilege. The Cleveland Cavaliers had finished 17-65 the season before LeBron arrived. In 2003-04, they improved to 35 wins, their last losing campaign for the rest of the decade. 18 more wins. 1 teenager. 1 season. The franchise went from the bottom of the league to a team that was knocking on the door of respectability. And they did it because of a kid whose own teammates had gone public with their skepticism. The league-wide veterans who had been watching this story unfold, the stars on other teams, the established players who would have to face LeBron in the coming months, were paying attention. Because what LeBron was doing wasn't just impressing people, he was sending a message. And the message was simple. I don't care how long you've been in this league. I don't care what your reputation says. When we're on the same floor, I'm not going to back down from you. And most of the time, you're going to be the one who has to answer for what happened. James entered the NBA with a $90 million Nike contract and the Chosen One moniker just as Michael Jordan left. $90 million before playing a single NBA minute. Nike made that bet on a teenager because they saw what the rest of the basketball world was about to find out. That this wasn't a prospect, this was a phenomenon. And phenomena don't wait for the league to accept them. They forced the league to adapt. The veterans across the NBA, the Paul Pierces, the Allen Iversons, the Kobe Bryants, the Tracy McGrady's. These were the men who had built the league into what it was during Jordan's absence. They had held the torch. They had been the faces of franchises, the stars on posters, the names on jersey sales charts. And now, just like that, a 19-year-old was walking into their league and averaging 20 to 6'6" without breaking a sweat. Some of them embraced it. Some of them respected it from a distance. And some of them decided the only way to handle it was to try to break the kid, to test him, to see if the numbers on the stat sheet translated into real gritty on-court toughness. When someone with 10 years of professional experience decided to make things difficult. What happened next, what LeBron did when those veterans came for him, is the rest of this story. Because here's the thing about the 2003-04 NBA season. It wasn't just a rookie campaign, it was a proving ground. Every single night, LeBron was walking into arenas where the veterans had already made up their minds that this was a kid who needed to be put in his place, where defensive assignments were made with the specific purpose of sending a message, where trash talk came at him in waves from players who had been doing this their entire adult lives and who weren't about to let some high school graduate come into their house and act like he owned the place. And the remarkable thing, the thing that made coaches, analysts, and fellow players stop and genuinely reconsider everything they thought they knew about player development, was that LeBron not only handled it, he thrived in it. He didn't shrink. He didn't defer. LeBron didn't just survive the transition, he dominated it. And as the weeks turned into months, and the months turned into a full season, a new reality was setting in across the NBA. This kid didn't have a ceiling that anyone could see yet. The veterans had their chance to stop him at every turn, night after night. They showed up with experience, with physical maturity, with the accumulated wisdom of careers spent learning how to neutralize talented young players. And night after night, the box score said the same thing. LeBron James was not a prospect. He was a problem. And for every veteran who had ever said anything dismissive about the 18-year-old from Akron, the receipts were piling up fast. There was a moment before all of this, a moment that tells you everything about who LeBron was and where he was headed. That happened not on an NBA floor, but in a gym, years before his debut. LeBron recalled a pickup game he played against Michael Jordan and other NBA pros, back when he was just 16 years old. 16, a sophomore in high school, in a gym with the greatest basketball player who ever lived. James mentioned that he didn't get to play for the first hour. You know, I'm 16. Young guy sitting there just waiting my turn. To be honest, I didn't even think I would get the opportunity to play. He sat on the sideline for an hour, watching Jordan. Watching NBA caliber professionals run up and down the floor, waiting. And when his turn finally came, when the veterans decided to sit out and this 16-year-old got his shot, James expressed how the situation felt like a dream. You know, for me to be on the court sophomore in high school with my favorite player of all time, if you pinch me, I was like, please, I hope I don't wake up. That's who LeBron was before the draft, before the Nike deal, before the Sports Illustrated cover. He was a kid who genuinely worshiped the game and the players who had mastered it. He wasn't coming into the NBA with arrogance. He was coming in with reverence and a skill set that was about to make the men he revered start looking over their shoulders. Before rookie James launched off his left foot and threw down an instantly iconic dunk in Sacramento, he was breaking bread with Moses Malone, a Hall of Famer who had connected with James through a Nike commercial shoot, visited the 19-year-old's hotel room, shared stories about life in the NBA, and offered up advice. Moses Malone, a man who had dominated big men for decades, a man with rings and MVP trophies, and a career that most players can only dream of, and he was sitting with LeBron the night before his debut, passing down whatever wisdom he could. It was just about hard work and dedication. James said of Malone's message, "Whatever you give to the game will give back to you." When you hear it from someone who had accomplished so much, it resonates even more. That night, eating chicken fettuccine in a Sacramento hotel, a teenager absorbed decades of NBA wisdom from one of the all-time greats. And the next morning, he went out and put 25 on the Sacramento Kings. That's how it started. One game, one statement, one rookie making it immediately and unambiguously clear that the league had better start paying attention because he certainly wasn't going to wait around for an invitation. The rookie campaign was barely a month old when the NBA started to notice something that went beyond just impressive debut energy. LeBron wasn't burning hot and cooling off. He wasn't having his star nights and then disappearing for stretches. He was relentless. Every game, every opponent, every defensive scheme that a veteran coaching staff put together to contain him, none of it produced the cool-down period that every other highly hyped rookie eventually experiences. James averaged 16.5 points, 6.9 rebounds, and 6.4 assists over his first 20 games, as Cleveland started off 5-15. The team was still losing. Cleveland was still figuring out how to build around this kid. Still roster building on the fly, still putting pieces next to him that weren't quite ready for what he was doing. But LeBron, he was averaging nearly a triple-double over his first 20 games. The team was losing, but the kid was producing at an elite level, and everyone in the league knew it. What made those numbers even more staggering was the context. This wasn't LeBron dominating fringe players or getting his numbers against teams tanking their way through a schedule. Throughout the season, LeBron was constantly rewriting the NBA's record books for the youngest player to category. Records that had stood for decades, records set by players who had come to the league after years of college ball, and organized professional development. LeBron was shattering them as a teenager, playing 39+ minutes a night against the best players in the world, the youngest player to score 30 points in a game. That was LeBron at 18 years and 334 days old. 18 years old. There were players on the floor that night who had been in the league before LeBron was old enough to drive a car. Veterans who had put in 7, 8, 9 years of professional basketball. And this kid came in and set a record for the youngest anyone had ever dropped 30 in an NBA game. The veterans on the opposing team that night didn't need a press release to understand what had just happened. They felt it in real time, on the floor, while it was happening to them. And if scoring 30 at 18 years old wasn't enough to make the veterans start reconsidering their assumptions, what came next certainly was. Because the records weren't slowing down. They were accelerating. Each one was more dramatic than the last. Each one was attached to a name that had stood unchallenged for years, and LeBron was pulling them down one by one, like a teenager, tearing down championship banners. The Cavaliers roster around him was still a work in progress. The coaching staff was still trying to figure out how to maximize his abilities without overwhelming a first-year player. But LeBron was operating like he'd already figured all of that out on his own. He was reading defenses, making passes that veterans with 10 years of experience would be proud of, and imposing his physical will on players who had spent their entire professional careers developing the tools to prevent exactly that. Combining freakish athleticism with a basketball IQ that looked like it had been in the league for a decade, James turned the Cavs into a young squad with potential and walked away with the coveted Rookie of the Year trophy. The basketball IQ part is the piece that kept coming up in conversations around the league. Players and coaches could account for athleticism. There are always athletic players. You game plan for speed, you game plan for size. You put a big body on someone, or you switch and trap and do what veterans do when they encounter someone faster or more explosive than what they're used to. But you can't game plan for a 19-year-old who reads the game like a 12-year veteran. You can't defensive scheme against a teenager who already understands help rotations, already sees the weak side cutter, 2 passes before the ball gets there, already knows what a trap is going to do to the defense before he even drives. LeBron wasn't just physically advanced beyond his years, he was mentally running the game. at a level that had no business being inside a first-year player's brain. Veterans who had seen hundreds of highly touted rookies come into the league and struggle with the pace, the complexity, and the relentlessness of NBA-caliber defensive schemes. Those same veterans were watching LeBron operate and struggling to articulate what they were seeing. Because what they were seeing didn't fit the template. There was no comparison that fully worked. He wasn't just a scorer. He wasn't just an athlete. He wasn't just a passer. He was all of it, running together in a 19-year-old frame. The hazing LeBron faced early on tells you even more about the environment he walked into. His teammates asked the 18-year-old if he would take the honor of leading the Cleveland Cavaliers onto the floor for the preseason opener. James proudly ran out and got ready to start warm-ups before suddenly realizing he was by himself. Back in the tunnel, his teammates were roaring with laughter. Naive and embarrassed, James could only shake his head at the joke. That's veteran culture. That's the welcome a teenager gets when he walks into a professional locker room. They don't roll out a red carpet. They don't defer to the hype. They test you. They see how you handle embarrassment, how you handle the unexpected, how you respond when experienced men decide they want to put you in your place, and remind you that no matter what the magazines say, you're new here, and they've been here. His Cavaliers teammates handled James like a kid brother, to the point that Coach Paul Silas occasionally had to step in to defend him like a father figure in the early days. His own coach had to step between LeBron and his teammates, not because LeBron was starting trouble, but because the veterans, the guys who had dismissed him before he arrived, were still making sure he knew his place, still making sure the 18-year-old understood the pecking order of professional basketball. And then the game started, and the pecking order became very complicated very quickly. Because when the lights came on and the ball went up, all of that veteran experience and all of that locker room hierarchy, none of it came with him onto the floor. On the court, it was just basketball. And on the court, LeBron James was doing things that veterans had no template for stopping. He was physically stronger than they expected. He was faster than they could contain. And his decision-making, the part that was supposed to be the rookie's weakness, the part that defenders were supposed to exploit by forcing him into situations he hadn't seen yet, was operating at a level that made him dangerous from everywhere on the floor. A college coach who evaluated LeBron early put it this way: I kind of view him a little like Magic Johnson in that he can really pass. Then, he's a little like Kobe, and he's got some Tracy McGrady in him too. Magic Johnson's passing, Kobe's scoring instinct, Tracy McGrady's athleticism. Those aren't just three good players. Those are three of the most distinctive and complete offensive players in the history of the game. And the man being compared to all three of them at once was 18 years old and hadn't played a minute of college basketball. Icons like Kobe Bryant, Allen Iverson, and Tracy McGrady were figures LeBron looked up to, never expecting to catch up to them, let alone surpass them. That's who LeBron was when he entered the league. He was a kid who idolized the players he was about to compete against. He wasn't coming in with the attitude that he was already better than these men. He was coming in with reverence, with genuine respect for what they had accomplished. But the game doesn't care about your feelings toward another player. The game doesn't reward you for being humble or for standing in awe of your opponent. When you step between those lines, you have to perform, and LeBron performed against the players he idolized, against the veterans who had told his own teammates he wasn't ready, against the established stars who had built their reputations on making young players look foolish. Allen Iverson, a man who had been one of the most unguardable players in basketball for years, a man who had taken a team to the NBA Finals almost entirely on his own back, went on record years later about what he saw when LeBron arrived. LeBron, I think, to me, is the best overall basketball player that we'll ever see. Iverson said, if you look in the dictionary and look up basketball player, there'll be a picture of LeBron. The best overall basketball player we'll ever see, coming from Allen Iverson, a man who once stood in this same court, a veteran himself, who had to face LeBron multiple times. The record books were filling up fast. LeBron set the mark as the youngest player to score 30 points in a game and the youngest player to score 40 points in a game, dropping 41 on the New Jersey Nets before becoming the youngest player ever to be named NBA Rookie of the Year. 3 age-related records in one season. Youngest to score 30, youngest to score 40, youngest to win the award. Records that covered not just the current generation of NBA players, but every player in the history of the league going back decades. These weren't soft records either. They weren't records that existed because no one had attempted them. They existed because reaching those milestones at that age against professional competition is an almost impossible task. The athletes who came before LeBron were elite. They were skilled, prepared, and competitive. They just weren't LeBron. And now, with each record that fell, the veterans who had been watching this season unfold were being forced to confront a reality that none of them had quite allowed themselves to fully accept yet. The kid was the real thing. By the conclusion of his rookie campaign, James was awarded with his first piece of NBA hardware, in the form of the 2003-04 Rookie of the Year award. At 19 years young, he became the youngest player ever to receive the award. The youngest ever, and you have to remember who voted for that award. It wasn't just fans or media. The league, the coaches, the front offices, everyone who had seen this kid play. Everyone who had tried to guard him. Everyone who had watched him impose his will on veterans night after night. All of them looked at each other and said, "This is the best rookie we've ever seen at this age." LeBron won Rookie of the Month honors every month in 2003. Every month. It wasn't even a conversation. There was no stretch of weeks where someone else rose up and gave him a challenge for the monthly award. He owned the rookie landscape from the first month to the last, and he did it while playing on a team that wasn't fully built around him yet, facing opponents who had nothing to lose against a rookie-led Cleveland squad, and everything to gain from the reputational bounce of putting that teenager in his place. But nobody put him in his place. Month 1, month 2, month 3, month 4, month 5, month 6, same result. LeBron James, best rookie of the month. Over and over again, the same verdict. And by the end of the season, when the Cavaliers added up their wins, the season before LeBron arrived, the Cleveland Cavaliers finished with a dismal 17-65 record. One player, one rookie, 18 more wins for the veterans on those other teams. The ones who had to guard him, who had to find ways to contain him, who had to answer for their performances against a 19-year-old. The season had answered the question definitively. LeBron James wasn't hyped, he was real, and the 41-point game against the Nets was about to become the most talked about single performance of his debut year. In his 69th game as a professional, James scorched the New Jersey Nets for 41 points and 13 assists, becoming the youngest player in league history to eclipse the 40-point mark. Game 69, not his first burst of energy out of the gate, not a fluke performance against a weak opponent. Game 69 of a full NBA regular season, still going, still hunting records, still punishing veterans who thought they had scouted him, still operating at a level that didn't make any logical sense for a teenager in his first year. He is also the youngest player in NBA history to score 40 points in a game. James first hit the mark 88 days after his 19th birthday, scoring 41 as a rookie for the Cleveland Cavaliers against the New Jersey Nets. 88 days past his 19th birthday. The Nets weren't a pushover that night either. They were an experienced team with veterans who had been to the NBA Finals within recent memory. And LeBron went there and dropped 41 on them like it was practice. That game cemented his Rookie of the Year case. Against a veteran Nets team, LeBron erupted for a season-high 41 points and 13 assists. He became the youngest player in league history to score 40 or more points. It was a masterclass in scoring and playmaking, a glimpse of the offensive force he would become for the next 2 decades. 2 decades. 20 years of what they saw that night. The veterans in that arena in the spring of 2004 were watching the first chapter of something that wouldn't end for another 20 years. They just didn't know it yet. And in the final game of the season, with Cleveland's playoff hopes still hanging by a thread, with everything on the line, in the highest pressure situation a team can face, going into the final game of the year, LeBron delivered 36 points and 10 assists. Although the Cavaliers ultimately fell short of the postseason, this performance under pressure was a clear indicator of his clutch gene. He didn't shy away from the biggest moments, he thrived in them. Pressure didn't slow him down. The biggest games of the season didn't make him go conservative. When the stakes were highest, he went harder. That's not a learned skill, that's character. That's something that either exists in a person or it doesn't. And in LeBron James, it existed in full, from the very first game of his very first season. The season was over. The numbers were historic. The records were broken. And now the veterans who had survived 1 year of playing against this teenager had to go home in the offseason and think about what was coming. Because his second season saw him improve across the board, upping his averages in scoring from 29 to 27.2, rebounding from 5.5 to 7.2, and assists from 5.9 to 7.2. The rookie who had just destroyed them for a full season was about to come back significantly better. If the rookie year was the warning shot, the moment where veterans nodded respectfully and said to themselves, okay, this kid is good. Then the second year was the full-scale siege, because LeBron came back in 2004-05 and did what almost no player in basketball history has ever done. He improved dramatically across every single category in year 2. Not a little, not a percentage point here or there, dramatically, across the board. At 20 years old, his second season saw him improve across the board as he upped his averages in scoring, from 29 to 27, 2, rebounding from 5.5 to 7.2, and assists from 5.9 to 7.2. His shooting percentage also shot up substantially from 41.7% in his rookie season to 47.2%. Those aren't small jumps. Going from 29 points to 27 2 points per game in one offseason is a seismic shift. That's a full 6 more points every single night against the same league, against players who had now spent an entire year watching film on him and preparing for him. It didn't help. He scored 6 more points anyway. He grabbed nearly 2 more rebounds per game. He dished out over an assist more per game. His shooting percentage jumped by more than 5%. Every single metric went up. And the veterans who thought the offseason gave them time to recalibrate, to find the defensive adjustments that would slow him down in his second year. They came back to training camp only to discover that LeBron had spent his offseason getting better faster than they could get better at stopping him. James was already statistically the best player in the NBA in his age 21 campaign, averaging a career-high 31.4 points, a mark that came at a time when teams averaged roughly 97 points per contest. Think about that. Teams averaging 97 points per game, and LeBron James, at 21 years old, was scoring 31.4 per game by himself. That means that on any given night, he was personally accounting for almost a third of what an average NBA team scored, against professional defenders with every scouting report in the league dedicated to containing him. James finished second in MVP voting that year behind a veteran Steve Nash, a decision that was not super controversial at the time, but would have had social media up in arms, given that Nash averaged 18.8 points and a league-leading 10.5 assists in 2005-06. Second, he finished second in the MVP vote at 21. Steve Nash had an incredible season, no question. But the fact that a 21-year-old was in that conversation, was putting up 31 points per game, was finishing as the runner-up in the most prestigious individual award the league hands out. That tells you everything about how fast LeBron's progression was moving. The veterans who had been in the league for a decade and had finally reached the level of all-star consideration, LeBron had lapped them. He hadn't just caught up to the established stars. In terms of raw statistical output, he was already ahead of most of them at 21. And the trajectory made it obvious to anyone paying attention that he wasn't done. He also averaged a career-best 2.2 steals per game that season. Although the season culminated in failure to make the playoffs, LeBron's greatness did not go unnoticed, as he made his first All-Star Game appearance and was named to the All-NBA second team. All-NBA second team in his second year. An All-Star in his second year. These honors are voted on by coaches and players, by the same men who had to guard him, by the same veterans who had to account for him in game plans night after night. And they looked at what he was doing, and they put him on the All-NBA team. That's the league saying, this isn't a hype job anymore. This isn't the Sports Illustrated cover, and the Nike contract and the Chosen One nickname talking. This is basketball. This is what you do on the floor against the best players in the world over an 82-game season. And what LeBron was doing was elite. Not elite for his age, not elite considering he came straight from high school, not elite with asterisks, elite by the standard of the entire professional basketball world. The veterans now faced a new reality. The rookie curiosity was gone. The let's see what this kid can do phase was over. LeBron James was a known quantity, and the known quantity was terrifying. He was faster than almost everyone, stronger than almost everyone at his position, and smarter than most of them about the game, and he was only getting better. The trash talk dynamic during this era is something that tends to get underplayed in the official retrospectives, but it was a massive part of what made LeBron's early career so charged, because the veterans of that generation, the Paul Pierces, the Kevin Garnetts, the Rasheed Wallaces, they were built in a tradition of extreme competitiveness. They talked. They got in your head. They tested your composure in ways that had nothing to do with basketball, and everything to do with breaking a young player's spirit before the game even got going. Paul Pierce was particularly known for this. Pierce's reputation as one of the most mentally tough and competitive players in the league was cemented early. In 2001, he scored 42 points on 19 shots in a road win over the best of the Shaq and Kobe Lakers dynasty. Pierce wasn't just good, he was confrontational. He told you he was good, repeatedly, loudly, while he was being good. He welcomed competition, he invited rivalries, and he treated any opponent who thought they could check him as a personal challenge. When LeBron James played his first game against Carmelo Anthony, the home opener in his rookie season in 2003, the Cleveland Plain Dealer ran a boxing-style promotional poster with the tag "Rivalry Begins Tonight." Rivalries were being manufactured around LeBron from the first game. Every opponent, every matchup, every game against a notable player became a referendum on whether the hype was justified. And every time, LeBron answered. Pierce's attitude toward opponents was telling. During one trash talk exchange, Pierce dismissed Amari Stoudemire by saying he should only trash talk players like Kobe Bryant and LeBron James. This is Pierce, one of the most competitive men in basketball, telling an opponent that he only argues with players at the highest tier, and he puts LeBron James in that tier. Early in LeBron's career, the players who had been around the longest, who had built their identities on competitive toughness, had already elevated him to that level. The veterans who tried to physically impose on LeBron learned quickly that it didn't work the way it was supposed to. He was listed at 6'8" and 250 pounds going into his second year. Not rookie 240 pounds. Not lean athletic but can be bullied. 250 pounds of muscle, running the floor, driving to the basket, going through contact and finishing anyway. The veterans who had made careers out of greeting young wings with hard fouls and physical aggression found that with LeBron, those tactics accelerated the damage rather than limiting it. Because when you fouled LeBron, you sent him to the free throw line. And when you were aggressive with him physically in the open floor, you risked giving him a clear path to the basket, where that 250-pound frame was coming at your defense like a freight train. The physical solution that veterans had used to tame young talent for generations simply didn't apply to LeBron James. He was built differently. He was built for this. The Cavaliers' rebuild around him was moving fast. His presence transformed the Cavaliers overnight, not over several seasons, not over a gradual rebuild. Overnight, the franchise that had been one of the worst in basketball went from an afterthought to a destination. From a team that couldn't fill its arena to a franchise that was appearing on national television over a dozen times per year. Free agents started taking Cleveland seriously as a destination. Coaches who wouldn't have given the Cavs a second look suddenly had their agents making calls. All of that was LeBron, a 19-year-old kid who had changed the economic reality of an entire franchise just by showing up and being exactly as good as everyone had hoped. And in the process, he had made the entire Eastern Conference have to take Cleveland seriously as a competitive entity, which meant every veteran star in the East now had to prepare for LeBron James twice a year in their building and in his. Tracy McGrady, one of the most gifted wing scorers of his generation, the guy whose combination of size and handle had made him nearly unguardable for several seasons, watched LeBron's rise from inside the league. McGrady said in a podcast that them 2000s wings were deeper, that the competition during the era LeBron broke into was as fierce as it had ever been at the wing position in NBA history. And still, LeBron didn't just survive it, he conquered it. The mental component of LeBron's game during this period is the part that veterans consistently brought up when describing what it was like to compete against him as a young player. His basketball IQ looked like it had been in the league for a decade. You could put a trap on him, and he'd read it before it was set. You could hedge hard on his drive, and he'd already seen the kick-out lane before you committed. You could double him in the post, and he'd hit the open man with a pass so precisely timed that your help defender was out of position before he even touched the ball. This was the part that made the veterans genuinely uncomfortable. Not the athleticism, not the size, not the explosiveness. Those things you can scheme against, at least partially. But a player who processes the game faster than you can execute your plan, that's a different category of problem. That's a player who isn't just better than you physically. He's making you look slow by thinking 2 plays ahead of where your defensive scheme is designed to account for. The veterans who had spent their careers mastering the ability to read and react to young players found themselves in the reverse position against LeBron. He was reading them. He was seeing the defense before it materialized and making decisions that rendered their preparation incomplete before the ball even moved. At 20 years old, against players with a decade or more of professional experience, by the time LeBron was deep into his second season, the league was operating under a new understanding. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't a talented kid who would eventually plateau and become a very good NBA player. Over the following decades, James fulfilled those lofty expectations, becoming, like Jordan, the most dominant player of his era, and a world-famous representative of his sport. The league's own history confirmed what the veterans had been experiencing in real time. This was a player for the ages. The records kept piling up. The performances kept escalating. The gap between LeBron and the standard for what a player his age was supposed to be capable of kept widening. And the veterans, the men who had signed into this league expecting that youth and inexperience would eventually give them some edge, some leverage, some moment where the young superstar's limitations became exploitable, found themselves without that moment. Five-star camp founder Howard Garfinkel recalled LeBron's early dominance, saying he totally dominated. "I've never seen anything quite like it." A man who ran elite basketball camps, who had seen Michael Jordan, Isaiah Thomas, and Kevin Durant all come through his program as young players. And he said he had never seen anything quite like LeBron. That's the note that hung over everything the veterans experienced when they faced him. There was no comparison that fully captured it. The statistical leap into his third year only drove the point home further. By his age 21 season, James was averaging a career-high 31.4 points. 6 years, that's how long it typically takes most elite scorers to reach 31 points per game at their peak. LeBron reached it at 21. And he reached it with efficiency, not by jacking up 30 shots a night, not by taking bad shots in garbage time to pad the stats, but by scoring efficiently in the flow of a legitimate NBA offense. The veterans around the league who had once questioned whether a kid from Akron could handle the professional game were now watching that same kid average over 31 points a night against them. The teammates who had gone on record before LeBron even arrived to say he wasn't ready, the players who had dismissed the hype, the veterans who had tried to physically and mentally test him in his first season, all of them had the answer now. He was ready. He had always been ready, and the basketball world was only beginning to understand the full scale of what they were dealing with. There's a specific kind of reckoning that happens when a veteran player, a player who has spent years building a reputation as one of the toughest, most competitive, hardest to guard players in the league, gets on the floor with a 19-year-old and walks away with something to think about. It's not just the performance, it's the adjustment in perspective. The moment where you start to understand that the hierarchy you've been operating inside has just shifted underneath your feet. The veterans of the early 2000s NBA didn't get to where they were by being soft. This was a physically brutal era of basketball, before the rules shifted to protect perimeter players, before hand checking was fully eliminated, before the game opened up into the spacing and pace that defines modern basketball. This was the era of hard fouls and defensive physicality, of exhausting 94-foot defense, and body-on-body contact that the current game simply doesn't see. And LeBron James walked into that era as a teenager and made himself at home. The Sacramento Kings veterans who played against him on opening night. The game, televised by ESPN, was the biggest regular season game we've ever had here. Sacramento owner Joe Maloof told the Cleveland Plain Dealer, saying LeBron is a breath of fresh air. Even the franchise that was on the losing end of his debut couldn't contain their admiration. The ownership of a veteran NBA team, watching their experienced roster get worked over by an 18-year-old, described it as a breath of fresh air. That's not just respect, that's reverence. The broader veteran community around the league processed LeBron's arrival in different ways. Some of the older players, the true legends, the ones who had been around long enough to recognize genuine greatness when it walked into the gym, embraced him from the beginning. Moses Malone, whom James would affectionately refer to as Uncle Mo, was one of the rare greats of the game to embrace him from the very start. Malone had seen enough great players in his career to know what it looked like. He'd played against and beaten some of the greatest basketball players in history. And when he sat in that hotel room with LeBron the night before his debut, he wasn't doing a charity appearance or a Nike obligation. He was recognizing something. He was seeing a player whose gifts were so unmistakable that you didn't need a crystal ball. You just needed eyes and experience. And Moses Malone had more than enough of both. The mentorship wasn't universal, though. Not every veteran responded to LeBron's arrival with open arms and sage wisdom. Some of them responded the way competitors respond, by trying to dominate him, by coming into games against the Cavaliers with something to prove, by treating the matchup against the league's most hyped teenager as a prime opportunity to establish who was still king of the East, who had paid their dues, who had put in the years that entitled them to look a young player in the eye and say, "Not yet." The Paul Pierce dynamic with LeBron is one of the richest stories in early career LeBron history, because Pierce was exactly the kind of veteran who wasn't going to make it easy. Bryant called Pierce one of the toughest players he ever had to guard. He learned the hard way in the 2008 playoffs, as did LeBron James. Kobe Bryant, a man who had faced every kind of wing defender the league could produce, called Pierce one of the toughest he'd ever guarded. That endorsement from Kobe tells you what LeBron was walking into when he faced the Celtics and Pierce in particular. Pierce had built his reputation over years of brutal competition. He talked the talk and then backed it up, possession after possession, game after game. He had earned his standing in the league the hard way, through a decade of physical basketball in Boston, and he was not about to hand that standing over to a teenager without a fight. Every game between Pierce and LeBron during those early years was a graduate-level class in competitive basketball, and LeBron kept passing the tests. Pierce clearly held himself at a level above by comparing himself to players like James and Bryant. But even that framing tells you something significant. By the time Pierce was making that comparison, LeBron was barely in his third year of professional basketball. Pierce was already putting a 21-year-old in the same sentence as Kobe Bryant. As a measure of the highest level of competition, that's what LeBron had already become in the minds of veterans who didn't give that status away lightly. The Kevin Garnett factor deserves its own space in the story of young LeBron versus the league's established stars. Garnett, by the mid-2000s, was considered one of the most competitive and mentally intense players in the history of the game. He didn't just want to beat you on the scoreboard, he wanted to dismantle your will to compete. He used physical presence, trash talk, and an almost supernatural level of defensive intensity to reduce opponents to shadows of themselves. Young players who came into games against Garnett often found themselves unraveling before they'd fully gotten into their rhythm. The mental assault came before the physical one, and by the time you were trying to play basketball, you were also trying to manage the noise coming from a 7-foot veteran with 15 years of professional experience, and zero patience for rookies who thought their reputation preceded them. LeBron's early encounters with that kind of veteran mentality, not just from Garnett, but from the wave of established players who used psychological pressure as a weapon, were some of the most telling moments of his development, because he didn't crack, he didn't go quiet, he didn't disappear into the background of a game when the moment got hard. He answered. He answered with the ball in his hands, with the game on his shoulders, with the full weight of a hostile environment pressing down on him. And he answered correctly. The trash talk culture of that era was something that LeBron had to navigate without the luxury of veteran allies who had been through it themselves. Pierce himself reflected on the era, saying, "We're one of the last two of our generation. There's no trash talkers in the league today coming up. It's a generation that's passing by, and a lot of these guys are friends. I don't think this new generation is as competitive as we were." That's Paul Pierce describing the competitive intensity of the era LeBron entered, and suggesting that the players coming up behind them weren't made of the same stuff. But here's the thing. LeBron walked into that exact era. He wasn't sheltered from it, wasn't handed a soft path through the league's transition to a friendlier competitive culture. He arrived when Pierce and Garnett and Iverson and Kobe and all of those hyper-competitive veterans were in their primes, when the game was at its most physically and mentally demanding. And he not only held his own, he set records, won awards, and made those same veterans put him on a pedestal before he was old enough to rent a car. Allen Iverson was a rookie when he first opposed Jordan in 1996. Years later, he squared off against a young James several times throughout the 2000s. Iverson, the answer, one of the most iconic players of his generation, had faced both Jordan and LeBron at different points in his career. And when asked to make the comparison, when asked to assess what he saw from the young kid out of Akron, he didn't hedge. He didn't offer the diplomatic answer. He said LeBron was the best overall player he'd ever seen. Full stop. The ripple effect of what LeBron was doing to veterans on the court extended beyond just the teams that played against the Cavaliers. It changed how players across the league prepared for and thought about young talent coming in. Because for years, the operating assumption was that rookies needed time. They needed a year to get their bodies right, a year to learn the schemes, a year to develop the mental toughness that the professional game demands. The veterans had years of evidence supporting that assumption. LeBron invalidated it, completely and immediately. His debut against Sacramento, his 41-point game against the Nets, his 6th consecutive Rookie of the Month awards, his All-Star selection in year 2, his 31 4-point average in year 3. Each of those moments forced a recalibration. The old rules about how long it takes to develop a player at the highest level simply didn't apply to him. And every veteran who had counted on those rules to give them an edge against young talent had to rewrite their mental model. His basketball IQ looked like it had been in the league for a decade, and that was the piece that never quite fit into any existing template for how young players develop. You could account for physical gifts, you could scheme against athleticism, but you can't manufacture an extra decade of experience in a player's brain. You can't give someone the ability to see the game at a veteran level when they haven't been in the league long enough to accumulate those repetitions. Except, apparently, you could if you were LeBron James. The stories from opponents during this period paint a consistent picture. Game after game, matchup after matchup, the veterans who faced LeBron came away with some version of the same account. He was ready, not ready for his age, not impressive considering his background. Ready, full stop. Ready to compete with the best players in basketball, ready to make veteran-level decisions in the biggest moments, ready to physically impose his will on players who had been doing this professionally since he was in middle school. The Sacramento Kings, who had been on the receiving end of that debut performance, became a kind of benchmark in the story, because their owner's reaction, that breathless enthusiasm, that immediate acknowledgement that something special had just walked into the building, captured exactly what the entire league was feeling. Not dread exactly, more like awe mixed with the sudden realization that everything was about to change. As a former Lakers coach put it years later, all of the hoopla, the hype, the expectations that were placed on him at such a young age, for him to not only surpass them, but just create a whole new world, the LeBron James world, where he took everything and tenfold and super exceeded everyone's expectations. A whole new world. That's the summary from someone who watched the entire arc of it. LeBron didn't just meet the hype, he built something beyond it. The trash talk that came at LeBron from veterans, the attempts to rattle him, to get in his head, to use the psychological weapons that experienced players deploy against young talent, told a story of their own. Because the fact that veterans were trash talking him was itself a form of respect. You don't trash talk someone you don't consider a real threat. You don't invest your energy in mentally destabilizing a player, unless you believe that player has the capability to beat you. The veterans talked because LeBron could beat them, because on any given night, if they didn't bring everything, the physical intensity, the mental focus, the competitive edge, he was going to take the game from them. And that reality, for players who had spent years being the unquestioned best player on the floor in most of their games, was something that demanded a response. Some of them responded with trash talk. Some responded with harder fouls. Some responded with admiration. All of them eventually responded with respect. Not the respect you extend as courtesy. Not the respect you offer because someone is famous or highly paid. The respect that comes from standing across from someone on a basketball court, giving them everything you have, and watching them absorb it and give you more back. That's the respect LeBron earned from the veterans. One game at a time, one record at a time, one 41-point performance at a time. When you step back from the game-by-game record, from the individual performances and the trash talk confrontations and the rookie year statistics, What you're really looking at in the story of young LeBron versus the NBA's veterans is something much bigger than one season or even one player's development. You're looking at a once-in-a-generation collision between expectation and reality. A moment where the basketball world had convinced itself that no prospect could possibly live up to what was being said about LeBron James, and then watched, mostly in silence, as he proved them wrong in the most public way possible. The only remaining question going into his rookie year was whether James would live up to his billing as the next Michael Jordan. That was the bar, not will he be good. Everyone assumed he'd be good. The bar was Michael Jordan, the greatest player in NBA history, a player whose dominance had defined the sport for over a decade, a player whose standard was so impossibly high that comparing anyone to him was almost unfair to the person being compared. LeBron not only met that bar, he eventually redefined it. Over the following decades, James fulfilled those lofty expectations, becoming, like Jordan, the most dominant player of his era, and a world-famous representative of his sport. The most dominant player of his era. Not one of the best, not close to Jordan. The most dominant, in an era that included Kobe Bryant, Tim Duncan, Shaquille O'Neal, Kevin Durant, Stephen Curry, and a generation of elite talent. LeBron James was the most dominant player of that time. The veterans who had tried to test him, to humble him, to impose the natural order of professional basketball on a teenager who hadn't paid his dues. Those veterans became supporting characters in one of the greatest stories the sport has ever told. Not because they failed, but because they gave us the context. They showed us what it looked like when the best professionals the game could produce threw everything they had at a 19-year-old kid, and the kid just kept going. The 2003 NBA draft will forever be noted as one of the best in league history, with guys like LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Carmelo Anthony, Chris Bosh, and 5 more All-Stars being taken that year. It was one of the deepest draft classes in basketball history, and even inside that class, alongside players who would go on to be Hall of Famers, champions, All-Stars, and multi-time MVP candidates. LeBron was in a category of his own. There was little surprise when the younger James received nearly twice as many first-place votes for Rookie of the Year, taking the honor over the star Syracuse product, Carmelo Anthony, himself a generational talent. The gap between LeBron and the rest of a historically great draft class was measurable. Not subtle, not a matter of interpretation. He won the award by nearly twice as many first-place votes. The coaches and executives who voted understood clearly what they were watching. A player operating at a level beyond his class, beyond his era, beyond what any reasonable expectation of a teenage first-year player should have been. LeBron joined Oscar Robertson and Michael Jordan as the only rookies in history to average 20 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists per game. 2 names: Oscar Robertson, who redefined the concept of a complete basketball player in the 1960s. Michael Jordan, who became the global face of the sport and the standard by which every player since has been judged. And LeBron James, 19 years old, coming straight out of a high school in Akron, Ohio. Those 2 names and the company they represent tell you everything you need to know about the scale of what LeBron was doing. Robertson's triple-double season, the one that stood for decades as the most complete individual performance in basketball history, was the kind of production LeBron was already approaching as a teenager. And Jordan's rookie season was considered historically special for generations before LeBron arrived and immediately joined him on the same list. The veterans who faced LeBron that first year were facing someone whose statistical footprint was already in the company of the 2 greatest individual seasons in the history of the position. They just didn't fully understand it yet because they were too busy trying to stop him to step back and see the full picture. The box score had been telling the story all along. The veterans were just living it. The physical transformation that LeBron underwent from his first year into his second and third tells part of the story of why veterans increasingly found him impossible to contain. He entered the league at 18 already bigger and stronger than most of the players he'd be going up against, but he didn't stop developing physically, the way most players do once they reach the professional level. He kept building strength, kept refining his body, kept adding dimensions to his physical game that were already elite. By his 3rd season, the one where he averaged 31.4 points, LeBron was a nightmare on both ends of the floor. On offense, he could score in every zone on the court, drive past speed defenders and through power defenders, and make the pass that ended your defensive possession before you even realized you'd been set up for it. On defense, the 4-time MVP morphed from a negative presence on the defensive end into a superstar stopper. He defended, at his size, with his anticipation, with his motor. LeBron made veterans on the other end of the floor uncomfortable in ways that had nothing to do with their offensive game plans. He was long enough to bother jump shots, quick enough to stay in front of guards, and strong enough to hold his ground in the post against forwards. A complete two-way player at 21. Veterans who had spent years exploiting young players' defensive lapses found that LeBron simply didn't have the lapses that rookies and sophomores are supposed to have. He made his first All-Star game appearance and was named to the All-NBA second team in his second season. The All-Star game is a popularity contest in some respects, but All-NBA team selection is about merit. It's coaches and front offices voting on who the best players are, and they put LeBron on that team in year 2. The veterans who were being displaced from those ballots, the players who had earned those spots over years of elite performance, were losing their positions on award list to a 20-year-old. That's not a minor footnote. That's the league's official recognition, through its formal award process, that LeBron James was already one of the best players in professional basketball in his second year. The veterans who had been grinding for a decade to reach that kind of recognition watched it happen for LeBron in 24 months. And most of them, the honest ones, the ones who had been on the floor with him, who had felt what he could do firsthand, understood it. Because they had been there. They had tried to stop it. They knew it was real. The story of young LeBron versus the NBA's veterans doesn't have a single dramatic peak. It isn't one game or one moment or one confrontation. It's a season-long, year-after-year accumulation of moments where the most experienced players in the world came at a teenager and found that the teenager was ready for all of them, and then came back the next year, better, and the year after that, better still. The Cavaliers' transformation from one of the league's worst franchises into a legitimate playoff contender and eventually a championship organization is the team-level evidence of what LeBron was doing to veterans on the individual level. His presence transformed the Cavaliers overnight. The same organization that had been an afterthought for years became relevant the moment he stepped through the door. Free agents took calls. Coaches were excited to work there. The national TV schedule filled up with Cavs games. That transformation didn't happen because the Cavaliers suddenly got better at drafting or their front office had a breakthrough offseason. It happened because one player, one 18-year-old from St. Vincent St. Mary, changed the competitive calculus of an entire franchise by being so good that proximity to him made everything else better. Teammates played better, opponents came in sharper, arenas filled up. The standard in that building rose to meet what LeBron was bringing every night. The Cavaliers improved from 17 wins in 2002-03 to 35 in 2003-04, their last losing campaign. For the rest of the decade, their last losing campaign. For the rest of the decade, 10 years of playoff-relevant basketball, all of it anchored by one player who had walked in as the most hyped prospect in NBA history and delivered on every single syllable of it. The veterans who competed against LeBron in those early years are part of an exclusive group. Players who can say they were on the floor when history was being written in real time. The Sacramento Kings who gave up 25 on opening night. The New Jersey Nets who gave up 41 in Game 69. The Philadelphia 76ers with Allen Iverson. The Boston Celtics with Paul Pierce. The Los Angeles Lakers with Kobe Bryant. Every team that came to Cleveland or hosted the Cavaliers with a scheme and a game plan, and a set of experienced veterans ready to handle the hype, and found the hype wasn't big enough. Iverson put it plainly when he said LeBron, I think to me, is the best overall basketball player that we'll ever see. If you look in the dictionary and look up basketball player, there'll be a picture of LeBron, this coming from Allen Iverson, a Hall of Famer, a man who competed at the absolute highest level for over a decade, who had faced Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson era stars, and every elite player between those generations. He watched LeBron come into the league and perform against the best competition in the world, and he concluded that no one in the history of the game had been a more complete basketball player. That's the legacy of what young LeBron did to the veterans. He didn't just beat them on the scoreboard. He changed how they thought about the game, how they assessed talent, how they understood what a human being was capable of on a basketball court. He walked into a league full of experienced, talented, physically imposing, mentally tough professionals, and he made them say things like that. The arc of what LeBron built in those early years fed directly into everything that came after. The four-time NBA champion, 22-time All-Star, four-time MVP, the draft selection of the Cleveland Cavaliers, first round, first pick in the 2003 NBA draft. Every single one of those honors has its roots in what happened in those early seasons, in those games against veterans who tried to stop him and found they couldn't. The championships, the MVPs, the All-Star appearances, they didn't come from somewhere else. They came from the foundation that was laid when a teenager walked into the most competitive, athletic environment in the world and treated it like home. As his long career progressed, James also became known for his unprecedented longevity and for maintaining his place among the top NBA players into his 40s, longer than anyone before him. Into his 40s. Still competing, still producing, still in the conversation about the best player in the league decades after he first stepped onto an NBA floor as an 18-year-old. The veterans who tested him in 2003 and 2004 couldn't have imagined it. But looking back at what that teenager was doing to them, game after game, it's hard to say they should have been surprised. The trajectory was clear from opening night in Sacramento. It was clear in the statistics, in the records, in the award votes, in the reactions of veterans who had been in the league long enough to know the difference between a great player and a generational one. LeBron James was a generational one, and he showed every single veteran in the NBA exactly what that meant, one game at a time, from the very first minute of his very first game. The story of rookie LeBron James isn't really about a rookie at all. It's about the league's response to something it had never quite seen before. A player whose combination of size, speed, strength, basketball intelligence, competitive drive, and physical development arrived simultaneously and completely, at an age when those qualities are supposed to still be forming. The veterans who challenged him were doing their jobs. They were protecting the standards of professional basketball, maintaining the competitive order that the league is built on. LeBron didn't disrespect that order. He didn't dismiss the veterans or treat their experience as irrelevant. He recalled sharing the floor with Jordan as a 16-year-old in a pickup game, saying, "This can't be real, man. If you pinch me, I was like, please, I hope I don't wake up." He revered the game and the players who had mastered it. He just happened to be ready to compete with them before most people believed it was possible. And in the end, that's what made the whole story so compelling. Not that LeBron was arrogant or dismissive. Not that he set out to humiliate veterans or make statements about his place in the hierarchy. He just played. He just went out every night with his 250-pound frame and his decade-ahead basketball IQ and his 19-year-old legs, and he played. And the veterans, the best professionals in the world, came at him with everything they had. And the box score told the story. Night after night, week after week, month after month, for a full season, and then the next one. And then the next. LeBron James was ready. He had always been ready. The NBA just had to get ready.